Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, SD-WAN and NFV Beyond the Hype. I'm delighted today to be joined in the studio by two of our experts from BT to share their experiences with you on this subject. I'm joined by Keith Langridge, Vice President for Network Services at BT, and Adrian Comley, General Manager for BT's Dynamic Network Services portfolio. Today, Keith and Adrian are going to be talking a little bit about the shift from MPLS to the new technologies. They're going to be talking as well about the challenges that some of the organisations are facing as they move to these new technologies and perhaps experience that some of the things are not quite the hype that they were expecting. They're also going to be covering the joys and the pitfalls about managing and deploying these services yourself, or whether or not it's advisable to bring in somebody to help you onboard these services. So I'm going to hand over to Keith now, who's going to talk about the shift and this extreme change that we're seeing within networks today and the drivers behind this digital transformation. So thank you. Over to Keith.
Thank you very much, Tara. Hello, everybody. We're going to talk you through a few bits and pieces here. First of all, I'm going to go through a little bit about building the WAN for the future. So this is the journey, the evolution path that we find our customers are on. Adrian's going to talk through managed SD-WAN services and our experience of a successful evolution along that journey for our customer. I'll then talk through a few examples of what we're seeing, some of the contracts we've been doing and some of the interactions with our customers. I'll have a few minutes for conclusions, and then we should hopefully have a quarter of an hour for questions at the end if anyone would like to raise any online. So let me make a start. In terms of the journey that our customers are on, most of our customers, we serve in BT Global Services, our customer base are large MNCs with operations around the world. And where we see most of them starting from today is an MPLS network. Now, MPLS has been the stalwart for connectivity, and it's been the stalwart for connectivity for quite a few years. Most of our customers have this in a hub and spoke architecture. So basically, they're using the MPLS network to pull data back into their own data center, where they've been processing applications, also where they provide their internet access. So basically, they'll firewall at those data centers and provide internet access out. Now, MPLS is not going away. And in fact, in the last year, we saw about a 23% year-on-year growth on MPLS volumes. We're seeing a large amount of high-capacity ports now coming onto MPLS. And customers are increasingly using MPLS. So by no means is MPLS dead. And MPLS will have a key part as we go forward in all of our customers' networks, we believe. As a result, though, we are busy building new capabilities into our MPLS services. So flexibility. So previously, MPLS has been reasonably inflexible. So companies such as ourselves are building the ability to flex ports, enabling our customers to contract at perhaps their average usage and pay only to peak up for their peak usage as a way of actually being able to carry the capacity on MPLS without having to purchase more and more bandwidth. And also the ability to break out of MPLS into other locations that I'll talk about in just a short while. When you look at the security aspects of MPLS, MPLS is in itself a secure network. It's a private network. So what you're seeing on MPLS is the ability for the NOC, the Networks Operations Center, to be quite separate from the SOC, and for our customers to actually have a sort of I suppose what we call a coconut, a perimeter security, where you've got a hard shell around the edge of the organization. And MPLS helps you maintain that hard shell. So what do we actually see as changing? The key things we're really seeing changing for our customers is the move to the cloud. Whether that's the move from their own data centers to key third-party locations, such as Equinix locations, or whether they're moving to AWS or they're moving to Azure for running their processing loads, or whether they're actually taking new applications that have sort of come from the cloud, so Office 365, Salesforce, etc. And this increasing move to the cloud is changing both the traffic dynamics and also the type of traffic. So first of all, for the traffic dynamics, all of a sudden we're seeing the internet as a destination, and that a lot of the traffic no longer needs to go back to the data center where it's going to be processed, but it needs to get to the internet. Now, current architectures drag that traffic back to the customer's data center, heavily firewall that, and then do that breakout. And that's changing the types of suitability for MPLS for the sort of networks of the future. The other thing we're seeing is a change of type of application. So as we move to applications that are more born in the cloud, and as applications for our customers' estate become rewritten to be operated within AWS, to be written within Azure, they become less finicky when it comes to transmission performance. So they can also use internet as a transmission capability as well. Now, when you're moving to a cloud, the real thing that drives your security aspects here are how you want to access that cloud. And MPLS providers have already linked their MPLS networks up to AWS and Azure, which will enable our customers to be able to directly access those services without a change of transmission architecture if that's what they want to do. And that maintains that break between the hard perimeter shell, the coconut, and enabling them still to change those traffic locations and where they actually go to. Where we see the real security risks and changes is where customers are looking at breaking out locally, local internet breakout. So what have we been seeing MPLS providers do? MPLS providers, including ourselves, of course, have been maintaining the ability for our customers to get to those cloud locations by putting in shared connectivity and linking up and service chaining with the AWS providers, with Azure, a number of service providers, to enable customers to use their MPLS infrastructure more appropriately to the cloud. Also adding internet gateways from MPLS to enable us to break the traffic out with firewalls and appropriate security for our customers, rather than have them have to drag it back to their own data center locations. So what does that actually leave? A lot of our customers now have either implemented or are moving towards hybrid networks. And one of the things that's driving that is increasing bandwidth demand. They're looking at MPLS and saying this is an expensive capability, even if I'm looking at the port flexing capabilities, and I've got a lot of traffic that needs to be taken. Internet can be used as a transport mechanism, and it can be used perfectly well as a transport mechanism by creating IPsec tunnels over that internet. Then what you can effectively do is use internet as a transport mechanism to draw back to wherever it is you want to be, whether that's your data center or your cloud location. It's where you have that local internet breakout. That's where you need to think about what's actually driving the security concerns. So local internet breakout is effectively going directly out to the internet from the branch sites where the traffic's originated. It seems like great news because it means you no longer have to carry that traffic across your network and break it out. But what it does mean is it brings the NOC and the SOC really closely together, because all of a sudden you've changed a network architecture and your perimeter, which basically was, I don't know, 5, 6 global data centers that you heavily protected with firewalls, becomes 400, 1,000 locations around the world, each allowing local internet breakout capability. So you have to think about options like, well, do I actually need to then put firewalls at these locations? So move from 6 firewalls to 400 firewalls, and am I going to manage those firewalls? Can I be looking to use services like Zscaler, like Cisco Umbrella, to provide that security for me? And how is it that I'm going to provide that security element? And I think what you're seeing here as you move towards hybrid networks, and the analogy we use is now your coconut in reality is broken. You can no longer really rely upon that perimeter security. And perhaps the appropriate analogy is an avocado. You keep your real secrets and stuff in a heavily protected core, but you realise that the edge of your network now becomes a little bit permeable as you provided a whole load of opportunities, an expanded attack surface for attackers. So where does SD-WAN come along? SD-WAN does effectively 3 things. SD-WAN creates secure IPsec tunnels. So it does enable you to create a secure VPN over the internet as a transport mechanism, or it'll link into MPLS transport and make the best of that. It also enables traffic steering, which basically means that if you've got 2 or multiple paths out of a location, you can choose which are your most important applications, and you can put those applications over the best performing path, and it'll dynamically change that as the application load changes and as the network performance changes. And then the third thing it does is it provides simple templated ways to do configurations. So instead of having to go in and configure each site on a different basis when you want to add a new application, what this will do for you is enable you to go in via a portal and put a templated configuration down and say, right, all of my sites that look like this will all now be configured like this. So you can roll out changes in application priority or security accordingly. Types of SD-WAN, well, there seem to be 2 solutions out there that providers of changes, integrated or overlay. Overlay just sits around the edge, and it really has very little to do with the underlying transport capabilities. Integrated is where providers have actually built the gateways and the controlling functions into their core networks. So a good SD-WAN solution would enable you to have an MPLS path into that SD-WAN that would really have nothing to do with the internet whatsoever, and it would also enable you to have an internet path into that SD-WAN. So integrated or overlay. Now clearly managed or DIY. Service providers are looking at managed SD-WAN solutions, and as a service provider providing managed SD-WAN solutions, we really do appreciate the extra work and the complexity that's required in offering that as a solution, and Adrian's going to go through that in a short while. And what do we find? Throughput and security for us are two of the key elements. Throughput, an SD-WAN box will have a published throughput in terms of, get 50 megs out of the site, 100 megs or gigs out of the site. But what you really need to be aware, and particularly if you're looking at DIY, is what will I actually get through when I've turned on all of the functions on the box. So I'm doing the path selection, the deep packet inspection, I've got all of the features turned on. Am I still going to get that throughput? And that's, again, another reason why managed service provider solutions are actually better in terms of analysing that. Security is another key. Most SD-WAN devices are protected by an ACL, an access control list. A good form of security, because it'll only actually let through communications from other SD-WAN devices, but it'll also look through management packets. So one of the key things you need to check is that actually you're not opening up a management interface as a way in which rogue agents can get into your network. And making sure then that the SD-WAN device itself is not providing a security issue. Integrating into things like Zscaler is a key way of getting outbound traffic to enable you to get directly into it from that site. So there are a lot more security aspects around SD-WAN, and SD-WAN should enable a better application performance over a hybrid and internet-based underlay. Now, everything we've talked about so far has been around physical boxes, and the world of NFV and virtual network functions is coming along. And the concept here is that you'll move from shipping physical boxes to a site to having one box on a site. And as you deploy applications, so that will be a routing application, an SD-WAN prioritization type application, a firewall application if you want something like that, a session border controller for voice, a WAN optimizer, you'll be able to deploy those as virtual functions down onto the device. So we haven't seen the NFV market taking off as quickly as we would have thought. We've worked with a number of our customers on solutions. Some of the challenges are making the business cases in terms of how we're going to do this. I suppose the main problem that we're seeing at the moment our customers are facing is, when do I move to this? So they need a trigger, and that trigger could be end of life of a particular type of equipment. It could be the need to deploy a new architecture of a particular site. And so what we've done is the approach that we've taken is not just to say, well, here's a list of virtual network functions which you can take from a sort of a choose it from the menu, but effectively to say we've got the ability for our customers to tell us which functions they want to run at the edge. So whether they're advanced in IoT and they want to run some processing that takes processing out and processes at the site and has less bandwidth coming up, or whether they've got particular applications, Windows servers, print servers, etc., that are key to their locations that they want to run there instead. So for us, we think that's it. And the key thing that we can see really for the benefits of NSV is going to be the commercial elements of it. So the ability to be able to spin up a virtual network function, and if it doesn't do what you want it to do, an accelerator and whatever, it doesn't actually improve your performance, take it down. Or spin up a traffic compression and acceleration while you're waiting for an upgrade in your Ethernet circuit. And when you get that upgrade and more capacity, you can spin it down. So where do we see the future going? And I suppose this is interesting when you look at it. So at the moment, a lot of the market is talking around NFV, SD-WAN, and the various vendor boxes that you can choose. And in reality, most of them do pretty much the same thing. Service providers will have integrated them into their network in a particular thing. They'll be wrapping service wrap around the overall capability. But there's a real shift, I suppose. There's sort of the shift in the underlay and the back end of service providers. It's going to provide a lot of the benefit of here. And this is using SDN capability in order to drive the network. And effectively, it's orchestration. So to do these complicated configurations and service chaining capabilities together it's going to be beyond what people can actually do. And so new software-defined capabilities will enable these services to be deployed. So that kind of orchestrator is quite key. Now in BT, we've built our own orchestration system. For us, it's cross-vendor. So having 4 or 5 orchestration systems aligned to each vendor technology doesn't help you, because what you want to be able to do is to go across the piece. And what this will lead to is more and more services, whether they be SD-WAN services, routes into cloud service providers, are driven via orchestration. Then you'll be seeing a new way of interacting with service providers. So you'll be getting visibility and analytics of what's actually happening in the network. So the visibility you'll see won't be a report of what the inventory system thinks is happening. It'll be a report of what is happening real time, live on the network. And the analytics will be able to identify where capacity is filling and suggest where we need to be able to making some changes. You need to make some changes. We make some changes on your behalf in order to optimize that. You'll be able to interact with the service providers via policy. So you'll be able to put a policy in which changes application prioritization and firewall capability. And a common orchestrator will be able to change those in parallel and make those changes for you. And all the logical amends and new service creation invites will go in via a portal. So you'll begin to see the connectivity world moving into the sort of the portal-based flexibility that actually you see quite a lot of in the compute world at the moment. And then where does you take that from there? You then take that, the ability to federate that, not just within the WAN, but to be able to take that over and put it into the data center LAN domains and cooperate and coordinate the federation across there, and also to be able to confederate it into the campus LAN. So at last, you will be able to, per policy control, to make configurations that will take you all the way from the application through your data center, wherever that is, whether that be AWS, Azure, or your own physical location, across your SD-WAN to your various branch locations or headquarters locations, and then make those same linkages across the campus LAN to really be able to give you a network that goes from application source to application use. And those are the key changes that we're seeing as we go forward in this. Anyway, it's a little bit about the route forward. Now, I'll hand over to Adrian. And Adrian, would you like to take us through some of the cross differences between managed SD-WAN and DIY versus NFV?
Thanks, Keith, and hello, everybody. So if we start off by looking at the services that a service provider provides around the SD-WAN itself, and then the wider service, including the network you've just described, which we call dynamic network services. So this chart just aims to summarise exactly what you get. So the left-hand side, you've got all the things Keith has been talking about in terms of a hybrid network, connectivity to the cloud, the ability to spin up virtualized WAN optimization within a service provider's network to give you that end-to-end applications control. And then we come on to the actual features inherent within a service, with an SD-WAN box. So first of all, you've got application-aware routing from Cisco, for example, or dynamic path selection from other vendors that steers applications across a hybrid network according to business priority and feedback on the network congestion and conditions. You've got IPsec to giving you encryption between your devices to give you a degree of security. And you've also got reporting. So, for example, with Cisco SD-WAN, you would get vManage reporting, giving you network congestion statistics, device health, device status, and ping and trace route for troubleshooting. So then beyond that, you're looking for SD-WAN to give you additional service providers to give you additional capabilities. So we offer customers additional reporting. We've partnered up with a company called Live Action, and that would give customers applications performance history, troubleshooting capabilities, ability to set application performance thresholds and alerts so they can see what's going on with their estate and take action accordingly. And also orchestration, and Keith, you just talked about orchestration and how it works within BT. Specifically, our orchestration layer would work with SD-WAN for the delivery. So it would have things like site address and IP address to enable our service teams to set up the service for a customer. And then it would help configuration across a range of topologies. And then going forwards, it would involve orchestrating VNFs within a service chain. So all of those kind of activities that now take place automatically. We've then got centre of excellence. So we recognised that there's no point in putting these new technologies through an existing network delivery chain and delivery management capability. So we've pulled out the skills, the people with the skills with these new technologies into their own unit, their own centre of excellence, so that we can give customers a new level of experience around these new technologies. So And teams will actually help customers work through any applications issues in terms of prioritization across their hybrid network, and give them advice on prioritization of the overall applications flows. We've then got logistics, which are often overlooked, but vital to be able to get the kit through customs to global locations for all of our customers, wherever their sites may be globally. And then we've got the overall life cycle management. And for something like, I think the best example is probably Cisco SD-WAN, that starts off as a V-Edge box and then evolves into SD-WAN embedded in the IOS of the current router estate, so ASRs and ISR routers. And then it also evolves into a VNF running on an x86 device. So no matter where our customers are in terms of their technology evolution, then we can support that and take them to where they want to be at the pace that's right for them. And then the last factor within the kind of SD-WAN managed service that I really want to focus on is testing. And Keith, you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but to give everybody an example, we tested a box recently where we turned on all of the features. We turned on layer 3 routing, layer 7 routing, we turned on the dashboard, the access control list. We had integration with Zscaler turned on, and actually the throughput on that box, so the bandwidth capability on that box, was 25% of what the manufacturer said it would be. So that's one of the benefits of going with a service provider, is that actually we test and test and test these boxes to make sure they're going to work and give you the performance you need. And for example, for our SD-WAN deployment, we give our teams a checklist, a 148-point checklist, so they know how to switch from an existing network to a network with an SD-WAN overlay. So those are the kind of differences you get that you don't get from a DIY deployment. And then moving out to the wider piece, the dynamic network services piece, we've got additional security. And again, Keith, you kind of highlighted some of these about moving away from just an access control list that's embedded in the SD-WAN to web filtering from Zscaler or DNS filtering from Umbrella, and then perhaps running those as a VNF as well. Well, not these specific ones, but running a firewall as a VNF on an x86 device. And then we've got professional services. So many of our customers perhaps don't have the skills in these new technology areas and are looking for consultancy advice on how to do an implementation. And we'll revisit that in a later slide. But this is in terms of how do you prioritise business outcomes? How do you have proof of value around these new technologies and write a business case to demonstrate to the internal stakeholders why you would want to implement SD-WAN, for example? Okay, now let's move on to the next slide and just look at the managed wrap around NFV solutions. So starting off, I think it's important that you have access to a range of devices that meet the needs of all of your sites, from the HQ down to your smallest branch site. And that's got to be really grounded in routing, because that's where you're evolving from a traditional routing estate to a device that will do a number of things, but routing has got to be the heart of that. And then really it's having a solution which is engineered so it fits together and works in harmony. So, for example, we're partnered with Cisco in this space. We've got the Cisco ENCS x86 device, the Cisco orchestration called NSO, and that APIs into our own orchestration layer that Keith, you were talking about earlier. An alternative approach would be to have a white-labelled x86 box with a hypervisor from a different manufacturer and an orchestrator from yet another manufacturer. And I think the key thing there is to make sure that that works to the same degree of engineering precision as a solution, a vertically integrated solution, perhaps from one vendor. And then we've got the VNFs, and you talked about the various options here. So having access to the VNFs that you would expect from a service provider today, in addition to routing, so firewalls, applications performance management from companies like InfoVista and Riverbed and Fortinet and Checkpoint. And then the flexibility, really, to onboard the requirements you need. So given the market's immature, given that a lot of customers are really trying to find out what it is they want from VNFs and x86 devices, the approach we took was to have a flexible onboarding process so we can bring in the IT applications, Windows Server, Print Server, We can bring in the customer's own applications like point of sale apps they've developed in-house, or they've got a third-party vendor that's not on our list or service provider's list. We can onboard those very quickly into a service chain and run those for a customer. Commercials as well, I think, are very important in this space. I think this whole market is immature, but commercials are immature in an immature market. So what we've got here is an ideal where customers want to be able to spin up and run a function, turn it on, turn it off as they need it with no minimum term, no penalties. And I think we're at the starting point of where vendors are actually offering these licensing terms into the market. We've got, for example, InfoVista offering free VNFs and you pay for what you use. Riverbed offering a kind of a token approach to kind of usage and charges. But I still think it's quite an area that needs further development. And really, until we get that, we're not going to see large global deployments of VNFs. I think that's quite a key point that the vendors need to put their arms around. And lastly, skills. And we've talked a little bit about the creation of a centre of excellence for the service operations teams to manage the deployment and in-life capabilities and work with customers, and how important that is to actually have that going through a dedicated team as opposed to a team that's perhaps sharing resourcing across networking and other traditional services. So you get the benefit of the people who really understand what they're doing and can help you with your problems. And in terms then of VNFs and some further insights I just want to share today. This is based on working with a number of customers and looking at their needs and requirements and sites. And we started off from the premise of, well, actually, you can deploy x86 anywhere. It's the hardware that's going to be the majority of the cost. And then we kind of know what customers want in terms of their VNFs. So what I wanted to do is just share with you some of the learning that we had from those studies. So if we look at the table on the left-hand side, this just shows by site type, so pretty much size of site, starting with small sites at the top, which represent 18% of volumes and 2% of the costs in this example. And then there's a column on the right-hand side which says suitable for x86. So actually, surprisingly perhaps, low sites or low bandwidth sites, small sites, potentially not suitable, and given the current economics of x86 devices, because you might as well deploy a cheap SD-WAN box. That's pretty much going to give you all the functionality you need at that branch site. HQs, or big sites, big important sites, again, it's not a clear cut because the amount of processing power you need to run a range of VNFs is probably going to exceed the box capability. So you're actually looking at, or being better off having proprietary standalone devices today, as opposed to VNFs running on an x86. So that leaves the bulk of the sites in the middle, for which some of them will be an absolute sweet spot, makes a clear economic case, and some which are more marginal, but the agility that this gives you makes it a kind of tips it over the edge, if you like. So that was the first point. It's that not all sites will be suitable for an economic deployment of x86 based on today's conditions. The second one was about hardware. So as you can see from the pie chart on the right, the vast majority of the cost isn't hardware, actually. It's software licensing, which, going back to my previous point on the last slide, it's important that the vendors really change their licensing commercials to drive mass market adoption. And then lastly, as we talked to customers, it became apparent that they didn't want to just onboard traditional services, but they wanted to bring on their kind of IT servers, their Windows servers, IT applications, their own applications, and hence that's why we adopted a more flexible onboarding approach, grounded in the kind of work we did with our initial customers in this space. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is just move on to look at how to improve the successful evolution to these new technologies. And I've just got a couple of slides I just want to share with some learning with you. So firstly, I've come across a number of instances, I'm sure you guys have too, about having a conversation with the sales teams or with customers where they say, I've chosen the technology, how much is it going to cost me? And I think that actually, especially with what we've talked about today, is perhaps starting in the wrong place. So our approach is to work with customers to understand what their business priorities are, first of all, before we get to the technology stage. So what are the key drivers? And that could be a move to the cloud, it could be improving applications performance management or cost reduction or whatever it might be. And then we've got looking at what customers have got in their estate today. So, for example, have they got MPLS everywhere? Have they got a hybrid estate? And how quickly are they moving towards their desire to move to perhaps more internet-orientated networking? We've then got discussion around the actual management model. So do customers want to, do they have the skills to enable them to manage this themselves in more of a DIY approach? Or are they looking for their service provider to manage everything on their behalf? Or indeed a kind of a hybrid model in between? And at that point, we can then start to narrow down the technology choices, do an evaluation with the customer, share some of the insight into the box performance we talked about earlier, and then select a technology. So really, you know, one of the things that we want our sales guys to do working with our customers is to go through this approach rather than leaping to a technology as the answer straight away. Now, customers can actually work through these steps themselves, or sometimes they need an additional helping hand. So service providers offer consultancy services, and we offer BT Advise within BT. And really, they will go through very similar steps to the ones I've just described. So in terms of prioritising those business outcomes, auditing a customer's current networking estate, being able to run a proof of concept around SD-WAN or x86, being able then to prove the value of that, with writing a business case to share with those stakeholders within the customer's organisation. And just one example, just to bring this alive a little, we've been working with a mining company. So we helped them develop their ICT strategy, and we looked at their current estate, looked at, for example, bandwidth utilisation on their MPLS links, when those circuits were due for renewal and the cost of those, and how they could cost optimise those circuits over time relative to their performance needs. We're running a proof of concept right now on SD-WAN, and I think really that's led the customer to realise that SD-WAN isn't this nice kind of simple thing you can just plug and play and it works. So really cutting through the marketing hype to work with the customer to show them what it's like in a live environment, running their live traffic, and how their experience would be when they roll it out to their entire estate. So those are the kind of things that we can help a customer to kind of work through. But I would say that going through some of the points on the last slide and this slide will really help the success of any implementation in this new technology space. Okay, and back over to you, Keith.
Thank you, Adrian. So it's a bit of our experience here, and what I'm going to talk you through now is just sort of 3 examples of customer contracts we've done in the SD-WAN space and some of the learnings we've got from them. So the first one is a global shipping group that was actually contracted out of our Asia-Pacific team. Interesting thing, $10 million contract. This is only 8 locations. However, those 8 locations are literally all over the world. And in those 8 locations, we have dual SD-WAN boxes stacked behind dual routers in a really redundant configuration. So this particular customer is really keen to make sure that he's got clear routing. It's primarily a mix of dedicated internet access, which is sort of high quality, non-contended access linked to our global backbone, so we know where it's peered to and there are SLAs associated to it, along with some broadband access. And I suppose interesting things for this, $10 million contract value, of which only $3 million is the network element. It's got SD-WAN, it's got connectivity, and it's got security. And here, I suppose the thing that surprised us, well, 2 things I suppose surprised us really. One is 7-year contracts, so it's good to see that customers are still doing 7-year contracts with service providers in the current environment. So there must be a degree of confidence there in the solution. But another thing is the focus the customer had on security. And as you can see here with Force Scout, CyberSOC monitoring, Splunk, CrowdStrike, all of these provided as managed services from BT. We've got a total solution here for the customer, in both their connectivity and their security linked in one. And in terms of whether this solution works and remains secure, the customer has one sort of throat to choke. So I suppose, what did we learn from this? Well, firstly, as the customer wanted to move to new transmission technologies, they found they didn't have not only the skills and knowledge of the transmission technologies, but also the skills and knowledge of security as they moved from their previous, I suppose I'll use the coconut analogy of a hard perimeter shell, to something actually which meant they had to worry a bit more about people might actually get in. So they need identity management, and they want to make sure they've got cloud access security broker, etc. And again, we found that this is using an integrated SD-WAN solution. So the services linked into our network and enabled them to be able to get access to a number of these services that we've already linked into to MPLS. So a very interesting deployment at the sort of the top end of security and at the top end of redundancy. Now, here's another one, a global professional services company. Now, again, here, this was an existing contract we had. And I suppose you would expect normally on a network contract you go back for re-sign and you'd be expecting to be re-signed a bit lower. Actually, we managed to expand this contract, and we've re-signed it at about double the rate that we were doing it before by expanding with a whole load of management services, application management services, security services, overall service management. Now, this is an interesting one. When you look at, again, back to what Adrian was saying, what was the customer actually trying to achieve? Well, he wanted to get cost savings from his network, but he wanted to make sure his applications would work and his end-user performance would work. An interesting one, I don't know whether you call this an SD-WAN deployment or not, but so, OK, we want to have path steering over the network, we want to understand what's going on, and we want to have dynamic control over the network. And the customer actually used a layer 2 network here. So this is an Ethernet network, not an MPLS or an internet network. So it's a complete layer 2 network, which of course gives total security to them in those sorts of elements. And they used a Connect Intelligence InfoVista, which is a form of, I suppose you call it SD-WAN, except it doesn't do the IPsec, that's done elsewhere, but it doesn't have to be done because it's an Ethernet network, and it doesn't do the central policy control. But what it's got is it's got all the path steering, application reporting, and a good reporting on what's on the network. So it gives the benefits of an SD-WAN type network to the customer without him actually having to move to internet or MPLS or make a choice between them. And again, another large contract for us, of which that network element was a part. And I suppose the third one here is a global electronics company. This is a sort of $70 million contract value for us. Again, it's a long-term contract. It's a mixture of SD-WAN, internet services, and overall network management. So this is a network element, so there aren't any security elements in this at the moment, apart from the integration of Zscaler, because the customer wants local internet breakout. So we've got that integration in with the solution. And the customer here was really looking to drive out short-term cost savings, so wanted to get cost savings in as quickly as possible, but maintain application performance. And so this is, again, another one where this customer also takes MPLS in their core for us, so saw the benefit of an integrated SD-WAN solution that can route traffic into their core MPLS and break out all those features at the same time as it can create SD-WAN paths over the internet as an important way forward. Again, I suppose what I take away from these three things, our experience is that our customers, large global MNCs, are not coming to us saying, sell me an SD-WAN. They're coming to us saying, I need an overall transformation in what I'm doing in my networking and surrounding activities. So you can see that the SD-WAN element of all of these deals is actually quite small compared to the overall deal value. And this, I think, is the benefit, again, of coming to a service provider like BT, in that you can get that breadth going across the piece that will enable you to have those benefits of SD-WAN. So whether you're chasing application performance, whether you're chasing a move to the internet with security and resilience, or whether you're effectively chasing cost savings, you can have those benefits, but you can have it in a much broader contract that helps you get those business benefits that you're driving. So, conclusions before we head into the questions and answers. I suppose, what are we learning? Well, I suppose for us as a service provider, we're learning that insight is really important. Talking to our customers, I suppose at the moment I could say no two customer conversations that I'm having are actually the same. Yes, there's a general path around that sort of circle that I took you around, but they're all starting from various different places. They've all got slightly different endpoints they want to get to, and they've all got a different assumption as to what they want to do in terms of chasing cost, risk, and what their best business benefit is. So having real understanding of what customers are trying to achieve and being able to share the way to achieve those things between our customer base. So take the experience from deploying for one customer and saying, well, actually, we can help you solve that problem, and we've done it before. Strategy and roadmap. Most of our discussions, our customers are asking for POCs, proof of concept. So let's have a proof of concept and try this technology. But in reality, that's not showing them a huge amount. Do the boxes work? You know, well, yes, actually, believe it or not, the boxes do work. The interesting thing is, it's the strategy and the roadmap. It's how they want to go round that circle, how quickly they want to go, their appetite for security, risk, etc. That's the bit that seems to matter mostly. And then, of course, the pace of change and being able to keep up with the rapid pace of change in this market. SD-WAN, I don't know, a year ago, Cisco announced the acquisition of Viptela. So a sort of a market-leading outsider becomes part of a major provider for our customers. We've had VMware, acquisition of VeloCloud, etc. And there will probably be more consolidation yet within the market. The ability to keep up with that and ensure that we can be flexible enough in order to provide what the latest technology is and what our customers need is important. Blueprinting. So really important for us to say, OK, then this is a configuration that works. Let's cookie cutter that out because there are so many different ways you can do this. But then, of course, the strength of the ecosystem. So it's really important to be working with partners. And we're one of the major partners with Cisco, for example, in terms of coming to market with Cisco SD-WAN, managed Meraki solutions, IWAN solutions in the past. And also in terms of the cloud vendors. So, we've announced a partnership with AWS, and we've become a network certified partner for network connectivity into cloud, which might be SD-WAN or it might be MPLS or it might be, as we're defining it, a cloud landing zone, an ability to be able to make the network a successful element of the migration to the cloud. So ecosystem and partners and be able to work beforehand with those organizations to enable to deliver for customers is key. OK, well, I think that pretty much covers what we wanted to cover in this session. Now, back to you, Tara.
Well, thank you very much indeed. It was really interesting, and I'm sure that people would have gathered a lot of information from the insights that you were able to share. Certainly the insights that you were able to share from experience, really, because that's when you move into an area of new technologies, it's the experiences that bring value, isn't it? So just to see whether there's any questions online, and please do ask any questions if you have any at this stage. I can see we've got one in, actually, Keith. So you explained the 6 stages in the diagram with the circles. Mm-hmm. What current stage do you see most of the BT customers at? I mean, what stage are they at in terms of adopting hybrid or SD-WAN or NFV?
So most of our customers are still sitting there with MPLS-based hub-and-spoke architectures. In some of their sites, they've introduced hybrid, so they've got internet as a transport mechanism. A few of them have local internet breakout and are scratching their head as to how they deal with the security aspects of that. A lot of our customers are doing proof of concepts for SD-WAN devices. So they're trialling bits of kit within their network. But quite often those proof of concepts are coming back to what Adrian was saying, because what it actually tells you is, yeah, but actually what am I trying to achieve from this, and what's my business problem, and how am I going to make sure? And in having the discussions with the customer about, well, what are you actually trying to prove from this proof of concept, you draw back to the, well, this is what I'm trying to achieve. Very few of our customers have taken up NFV. Yet they're working their way through the business cases. They're looking for the triggers. So it's between that MPLS piece and that hybrid piece. Every single one of them sees that vision around the around the outside of that wheel, and is keen to go on that journey. Only a few of them have actually started yet.
Do they struggle to build the business cases? Do they need support and help in that area?
They do need support and help in that area. They will probably have been approached by an SD-WAN box vendor who will, as it's no skin off their nose, have told them, if you spend a whole lot of money buying my boxes, you can save far, far, far more than that money on your network. When you then come and do the designs and you come and work out, you find that actually, well, yes, theoretically I can, but perhaps the payback's going to be 3 years, and in the current climate of my organisation, is the CFO going to sign off a 3-year investment. Maybe I won't save what I want because effectively I've got far more bandwidth going through, and the bandwidth will top out. So our customers do need help in terms of building those business cases and helping them understand what it is they're actually going to benefit, and hence where to go for the technology and which technologies to go for.
Thank you. One of the other questions is, as an organisation, do you plan to move to a DevOps style of deployment?
Yes, we do. As the technology moves faster, we have to do that. I think, as Adrian mentioned, we're focusing a lot of our SD-WAN deployments around a centre of excellence who are very closely linked with our development teams. So we've got the development teams, we've got the technical designers, and we've got the centre of excellence effectively doing that sort of iteration on behalf of our customers. Early deployments of SD-WAN have been a wonderful way for us to get direct feedback from customers and end users about how they actually want to use these new technologies and what information they want. And so the more and more deployments we do, the faster and faster we're getting that feedback. So yes, we are moving to a DevOps style for this new technology.
Okay, another question is, do you plan your SD-WAN being orchestrated by an NFVO or direct to the end-to-end orchestrator, EEO?
That's an interesting one, isn't it? Let me try and answer that then by explaining our orchestration approach. So I'll take the example of our NFV approach, where we're using a Cisco ENCS box. So we're using Cisco's NSO orchestrator to link between our overall service orchestration and creation down into that box. So we've built our own orchestration capability, which uses service and network modeling in Yang, and it basically interfaces down into the network through Tosca, so the latest standards. And then it links down, and those instructions go into NSO to configure the ENCS boxes. And again, those instructions go down into, we work on a product called Agile Connect with Nokia Nuage into that, and the same instructions from that orchestrator go across into vManage, and we'll do the configuration and management on the Cisco SD-WAN solutions. So I'm not too sure if I'm using the exact terminology, but our view is an overall orchestrator using Yang and Tosca, and then looking down into the more element-based orchestrators like NSO, linking into ENCS as we go, and vManage as we go down.
Thank you. I hope that answered that question. We've got another one here. What is different about how customers are buying SD-WAN?
Adrian, do you want to?
Yeah, I think it goes back to some of the things you were talking about earlier, Keith. You know, historically, customers would buy a network and they would deploy it across their entire estate. So they would say, day one, I want to start a rollout of hybrid network X. Actually, with these new technologies coming in, customers want to do a proof of concept first. So it's picking 5 sites, it's getting the SD-WAN kit out there, it's working with a service provider to see how that works with live traffic going over it. And I think it's very important to actually have an operational trial just to check that the customer knows how the dashboards work, how their traffic will be directed across hybrid networking paths, and they do that in conjunction with their service provider. And then they can begin a kind of a mass rollout at that point. So I think it's an interim step of having this proof of concept. Plus, we talked about the additional steps about having business cases and proof of value earlier, and perhaps using a professional services capability to help them with that. So it's quite different from buying traditional network.
Here we have a question about cost savings. So what level of cost savings do you see customers achieving through their SD-WAN deployments?
Right, OK, that's an interesting one, isn't it? We've seen some of our customers work with us for 6 months, putting together business cases, working out how they can change their structures of their networks on a global basis, and coming up with a conclusion that's going to take 3 years or more till they get the payback. So will they see a level of cost saving? Yes, but will they see it within time that meets their financial hurdles for levels of investment? Not at that level of architecture. Also, there are a whole load of, I suppose you'd call them hidden costs you need to consider when you're deploying an SD-WAN, not least of which, as you can see from the example of the global shipping company I gave earlier, is security. And as you are going to move from a sort of a perimeter defence security through a few data centres to a more potentially permeable edge, you've got to spend money on that security piece as well. So there isn't a hard and fast number where we're saying, yes, you're saving on your network. And as you can see, for us, it's less about you'll save X% on your network, more about so this is a solution we can put together that's got some new elements of underlay networking, so sort of internet transport as transport, new elements of overlay networking, SD-WAN devices or InfoVista path selection or NFV, security elements in it, and this is how we can help you achieve your business objectives within the budget that you're actually looking for. So if it's just purely network, yes, SD-WAN will bump that cost down, but then there's the other elements that need to be thought of before the overall business benefit can be achieved.
I think it's worthwhile just to add, if I may, Keith, that a lot of our customers were moving to a hybrid networking strategy anyway before SD-WAN came along. So they're already looking at bringing internet into their portfolio and realising cost savings that way. And I think you've got a lot of marketing hype around SD-WAN, perhaps driven by SD-WAN being born in the US, where a lot of customers were still on legacy private circuits, and moving to from a private circuit onto an internet link. There is a big price differential there. So that was great headlining, but actually the reality can be very, very different, and customers are already on this journey. So SD-WAN can actually be a small, incremental cost reduction offset by some of the challenges you mentioned, Keith.
Yeah.
We've got one here about prioritisation. So how do you prioritise applications running in the cloud?
Well, that's an interesting question. Do you want to have a go?
Yeah. So basically, if you're looking at prioritising your applications, you can actually set a priority, kind of like class of service, or a gold, silver, bronze queue that your applications will go into. And then the SD-WAN device will then prioritise that queue or that application across the best performing path. And that could be an MPLS path or an internet path. So if we're going to the cloud, then you may have an end-to-end MPLS path there to take you to Azure, for example. If you're looking at O365, then that might be more internet-based. But in the event of an application failing to reach a predetermined threshold performance set by the customer, then there'll be alerts, and that application will change to another path. So that's based on real-time feedback on network performance and congestion and packet loss within the network. So this happens automatically. Once you set up these business rules, then this will happen automatically to provide you with this kind of application-aware routing or dynamic path selection approach.
I think we'll do one more question and then we'll bring it to a close. And the final question is, there's been a lot of hype in the media about when NFV will take off. When do you expect the market to suddenly take off?
Yeah, well, I suppose we would all expected the market to have suddenly taken off by now if we'd have believed what we all read 2 years ago. But it will come. I suppose the things that are actually driving it are building those customer business cases, which is driven by end-of-life equipment and when they want to upgrade. It's driven by changes of architectures. Again, some of the large deals that we're putting together at the moment have got an NFV element within them as our customers move along there. It's going to be driven also, I think, quite a lot by what the major software vendors actually do. All the time that major software vendors are retaining all of the value, the cost effectively of what they're offering as a virtual license to run the software and effectively providing the hardware for free, it does become quite hard to build a business case for an NFV solution. As they move to providing service provider licenses, so as Adrian was saying, we hold the licenses and effectively then can provide the customers the benefit. What you're then going to see is more flexibility. So I think it's going to start over the next year or so. And then it's going to grow from there. But really, we are in the hand, I think, a lot of the software providers to be able to take this on board as a market that they want to see growing, as opposed to perhaps something that at the moment just doesn't seem to be taking off the way we all thought.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you if you did try to submit a question, and any questions we haven't answered, we will definitely answer offline after the webcast. Thank you very much, Keith, and thank you very much, Adrian, for your time today. And we hope you found it interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.